Hello, we're live. This is the Coach Support Show where science meets strategy. And Watson, what are we going to start with this week?
So, John, we are going to dig into your experience at Nord as the head coach so far this year. So we're actually going to reflect. We've done reflection before, but this is going to be sort of longer scale, more general reflection over the whole course of your experience so far. So you have been tracking your thoughts, compiling your thoughts, and you spent some time putting this together. So we're going to go through your sort of reflective model of what's been happening.
Yeah, so my way I do reflections at the end of the split is super simple, but I've just from the first moment I did it, I didn't need anything else. It's so useful. I've done it with a bunch of clients already, different people reflecting at the end of their splits, and every time it's just really useful. I actually have yet to come across any organization, including large organizations, who have a process like this. Even though it's unbelievably simple, it's not a complicated thing to do. I think actually it's some of the most important things that it is possible to do. And yet still, it's just not common practice, basically. So I just do it incredibly simply. I use an app called draw.io because why not? It just happened to be the one that I used in the past. I put a little hot air balloon in the middle, draw a line through the middle. If it was in person, it would be a whiteboard. And then all we do is below the line, we put processes that we did. So things that we did that made us do worse or brought us down, brought our hot air balloon down. And above the line is things that we did or things that happened that brought us up. So it could be, okay, the team atmosphere, for example, for me, that's right at the top, the absolute top. So what I would do if I was doing this in a group is we would have a normal like brainstorming session, however you want to do brainstorms. Again, have a specific process of how I like to do it, but I'm sure there's a billion ways to do brainstorms, where we just get basically all the ideas on the board. Then we start to like group them and stuff. Then what we want to do, if possible, is kind of rank them. So which is the worst thing? And then kind of from there, if that's the bottom, what's closer to the line is less impact. And the basic idea you want as an end goal is you want to have some processes put in place so that the things below the line don't happen again. The things above the line happen again, like we can intentionally make them happen. So it's unbelievably simple, but I found it just really effective. So I haven't changed anything. I've just recreated the same thing over and over again, basically. And this honestly is like where the actual work happens and the actual improvement happens for me in terms of the coaching, especially. It's very easy in esports to be stuck in this kind of reactive mindset where we just sort of turn up to scrim because we're scrimming and we scrim the person we're scrimming because they were the ones we could book. And then it just repeats and repeats and repeats. And this is what I talk about a lot, where there's a lot of organizations who are stuck repeating the year because it comes to the end of the year and they're not taking anything from last year forward, like officially. They're just sort of thinking, well, we've been through that experience, therefore we've learned from it. And for me, that's always a bit of a trick. It's like, how are we going to learn from it? What are we actually going to do differently? So yeah, that's kind of the purpose of it, and the overview.
Yeah. So I think fantastic. I've actually seen you do this in practice. Like we were both working with coaches over at G2, and you ran through this exercise, and it was fantastic. And it's sort of about the way you use the word impact. I think is really important. So you map it all out, you throw everything down on the board, and then you sort of move it around according to its impact, its weight. And so your hot air balloon rises, and things at the very top are high impact, very good things, and yeah, so on and so forth. I think that's really interesting to think about. So it's not just what was good, what was bad. Did it matter really at the end of the day, and how can we make it more impactful? So I think it's a really great way of thinking about it.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking through. There's been a couple of times when I've worked with people and it's not worked so well, but I still was very useful to do. I think also, so the impact, yes, but also thinking about like what we actually did. So for example, Visitachi was very sick over finals. I haven't put that on here. So maybe actually there are some things that we could do around that, but I think probably, at least for our level, for the fact that we're part-time and not like professional, like that's maybe a bit much, but that is probably something actually to consider. So now I'm saying that I probably should have put it on put it on the board, because there might be things that we can do around that actually have any kind of impact.
The beauty of it, though, is the simplicity, I think, as well. So you could have like boxes about what was out of our control, what was unforeseen, that kind of stuff. What do we take sole control over? But I really like the simplicity of it. I do just want to clarify, what's like when you sit down with the team and you get all of the, should we say, different themes, different ideas that people put on the board, what's the opening question? Like, what mattered for us? Or
Well, mostly, so this time I haven't done it with the team, for example. I've done it with teams in the past and without. I think with teams it can get a little bit too much when there's that many people. So actually this time was just myself, and then I went through it with Michelle, who's the owner, so that we can like make a plan for next split. So the opening question would be things that we did that had a positive impact, go above the line, and things that we did that had a negative impact, go below the line. I should probably actually dig up at some point. There was one organization that I did it with where I remember thinking like it's not quite right, and I couldn't actually work out why. So definitely should dig that up and work out exactly what went wrong there. Where there ended up just being a lot of things that kind of were more like, okay, this draft or this very specific thing, which is, I think, less productive, because like I say, what we're looking for at the end when this is done is a bunch of processes that we've given to someone to make it so that this doesn't happen again, or given to someone to make it so that this does happen again in a big way. So that's really the goal, and we can kind of do that even already, because we've had our first meeting about it today, actually going through this exact same thing, where we went through and actually assigned someone responsibility over every single one of these things. And it's not that many things, to be quite honest, but you can use your time in off season to then create processes so that these problems don't happen again. And again, I want to stress, so that the good ones happen again is just as important as missing out on the things that brought us down.
Yeah. No, I love that. So do you want to walk us through it?
Yeah. So I was trying to work out how to do this. I didn't want to, especially as we're doing this live now, it's a little bit hard. I think I thought about like putting something over the top in the VOD, but actually, to be honest, like I say, it's not a complicated thing. So you're just going to have to imagine a sheet with a line in the middle. That's all you need. You can have a picture if you want. I like having a picture. And then we'll just go through what I've got one by one. So we'll start with the things that kind of brought us down, the things that made us perform worse. And I can go over as well what our solution is to them going forward. And
great.
We can maybe check in at the end of next split if it was useful or not. So let me just move some things around. Okay, that's not worked. Right. So the bottom one for me, the thing that had the biggest negative impact for us was the level of scrims that we were able to get. We didn't get good enough practice. We weren't able to play against high enough level teams to really push us and to really learn the things that we need to learn. Because especially when you're a part-time team, especially when you're not in person, level of competition does matter a huge amount, because just the game is too complicated to be able to say, right, even though we win this game, we would have lost future games if we had done this and this and this and this and this, because as soon as they're playing differently, it changes everything. So it can be possible in certain situations. For example, actually, just making something about a review that we had where basically the enemy team let us win a fight that we shouldn't win. And so we all come somewhere that we shouldn't go, and it works. And so that is maybe a bit easier, where you say, look, they shouldn't let us contest this. We should lose this objective for free. But actually, if you're talking about a whole day of practice, it's so hard when you can just run over people, do whatever you want, and probably still win. And having players who are as good as the players that we had, but also doing practice publicly, made that really, really difficult. So going forward, the things that we're going to do to change this is that firstly, we're going to book much more in advance, which is already a big one, the better the team, the earlier they book in advance. So Nord being used to being a much worse CRL team than they are now with the new lineup and the new league.
Coach?
People book the roster, they don't book the team. So everyone wants to play against Centurion and Treats and stuff like that. So they would have been more used to being like kind of last on the pecking order, and we really needed to leverage the fact that actually people did want to scrim us, but the teams that we wanted to scrim were booked up 2 weeks in advance, and we weren't. So that's the first thing, is that we're going to start booking much more in advance. The next thing is that we're going to do 1 day of non-streamed scrims a week. And that'll be a consistent day. And so we're going to really try and make use of that day and say, look, that's when we're going to scrim like an LFL team, an LEC team, or, you know, a top level team, the best, most intense scrim that we can find. Now, from my point of view, I'd like to make sure that that's not the day before our competitive game, because if we do get to scrim an LEC team, I don't want to just get battered for a day and then and then play our competitive game the next day. We talked about the structure of the week before. Yeah, so booking in advance, booking night blocks, and booking an off-stream scrim. Those are going to be our solutions. And the person who was booking scrims has changed already, but I'm going to do a bit more with the new person who is booking scrims now to make sure I'm very clear about all these things. I'm very clear about exactly what I want, exactly what we should be looking for, and the teams that we would kind of say no to. But it's very expected. You know, we did the things that you do if you're maybe the smaller fish in the pond kind of thing. So technically we weren't sure if we'd have made finals, so we didn't book until we were sure, rather than book and have to cancel people because we got knocked out. Whereas you should do it the other way around, basically. Like, unfortunately, guys, we got knocked out. Like, you're going to have to find someone else to scrim. Yeah, that's better than booking for the finals week. We literally booked on the week kind of thing. And so we didn't ever really have kind of strong competition. So that's an example. That was the thing that had, I think, the biggest negative impact on us, and some processes already that we put in place to fix it.
Cool. Just one question. It's not particularly related to like the deep, dark depths of academia as it applies to esports, but it's just about, did you notice a difference in terms of streaming? Like, did you see that people were reluctant to engage with you guys in scrims because
yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. That's the main thing, to be honest.
Okay.
Like, we would have been able to scrim LFL teams pretty much whenever we wanted, but we were streaming it. Because
so most people said no way.
Yeah, most people said we can't stream.
Interesting.
A lot of people said even for like night blocks we can't stream. So even that would be a little bit harder. But we did have a couple where we could play against good competition. So we're just going to be a bit more kind of picky around who we are going to scrim, and trying to really just sort of make the most of it. So there will be, you know, we want to scrim Lost Returns as much as we can, because the unfortunate thing is that they're the best competition for us, because they're probably the best team who streams. But we play against them. So we're probably going to do, like, in the beginning, we're probably going to scrim them a bunch. And then once we get later in the NLC and we're matching up against them, we'll probably stop scrimming again. I mean, what you do in the LEC as standard is obviously they have to just scrim LEC teams as much as possible. So they don't scrim people they're going to play within 2 weeks. Except from, actually, apparently G2 scrimmed KC 2 days before the finals and showed them all their picks and then lost. So I don't know what was happening there, to be quite honest.
I don't mind that. It's this is what we're going to do. We're going to execute it. It's your job to try and stop us, and we're confident in our abilities, and I don't mind it. It's kind of it's a bit of I don't know. Psychological strategy.
I don't see that upside, though. I think the only logic that I can think about it is they thought Fnatic would win, and so they thought they weren't going to play against KC.
Possibly.
But for me, I just think we have like this default reactive approach where people are thinking like we're an LEC team, therefore we scrim LEC teams. And instead you should be asking, like, what do we want to come out of this practice? 2 days before finals, do we need strong competitions because we're going to learn something new that changes the way we play the game, and we're going to suddenly improve as a team, or is it a bit more running through the motions, making sure the picks are okay? It's like this thing we spoke about with T1 at Worlds, they only discuss draft. It's not because they never discuss anything else. It's because everything else should be done by the time you're at your competition where you want to perform. And I would make the same argument there. Like, okay, there's not many LEC teams left, but just scrim the best or second best LFL team. Like, okay, you'll win, but does it matter? That would be my argument.
Yeah. I don't know. I like the focus on it. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it sort of suggests like we are confident enough in our abilities. We feel like we're at a point where on game day we are going to be ready, and we can either roll out the game plan or we're confident in our abilities to react. It's your job to stop us, but we're going to focus on us. And if we can put a seed of, well, not a seed, but like if we can make you think, be overly concerned about what we're going to do and focus less on what you're going to do, I don't mind that actually, because you can overanalyze perhaps.
Maybe. I just don't think that's how it works in practice.
Right.
Because it's a separate phase of the game. You don't need to focus on how they play. You just watch what they drafted and say, okay, we're going to play this champ because it's good against all the things that they like. Then I don't see the upside of scrimming, like showing everything to KC.
Are you not thinking? Are you then not thinking about like, well, they picked these, therefore we're going to strat against those things? But then, are you not thinking, well, I don't know, it might be a ploy, right? You're also thinking like, did they show us their true picks, or are they planning something else? And I don't know.
I think if it was a ploy, then I think it's a fine idea. The thing that we've seen from what people have said is they had the exact same priorities when they played us 2 days before in practice. And for me, the only possible upside, the only possible argument for even doing that is thinking you're so sure that Fnatic would win, so that you show KC your real picks, and against Fnatic you show them different picks. Because there's just no. If you knew what the enemy, like if I knew what the enemy team's priorities were, like for sure, or a load of extra information, it does nothing but help. Because these phases are different, and it's not like football, like they're going to do a 4-4-2. It's like, okay, but it's like of 160 champions, their priorities is useful. This is a very interesting.
Yeah, we're going off out of my wheelhouse.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so that's a separate thing. So that was the worst one for us. For me, that was the level of scrims that had the biggest negative impact. If I could change one thing about last split and give us a much better chance, I would say if we could play better teams. So if we could have found a way to have our average scrim opponent, like if we could somehow find a way to just only scrim LFL teams, including streaming it, then we would have been a much better team. And that's the thing that had the biggest impact. So
and because of that, it's the furthest away from the line.
Yeah, furthest away from the line, right at the bottom. Then the next level up was actually around balancing the fact that No Way specifically is a full-time streamer. That's his job. And there's loads of mistakes that I made around that, but also things that I think I need to work with him on for next split. And what I would say is actually, now I would say it, but I didn't at the time. It's like, I should have thought about it like he has a full-time job. Okay, his full-time job involves playing a lot of League of Legends on stream, but he can't reply while he's at work. And he's going to do loads of other meetings around that. He's constantly meeting with like partners and sponsors and all this kind of thing. His schedule is dictated by his work. Just like someone who had a 9 to 5, I wouldn't either try and do anything with them between 9 and 5. And I also would be not trying to book scrims at 1 a.m. The reverse is true for No Way, because the audience is only there from 4 in the afternoon until midnight. So he has to work from 4 till midnight. And then, he does 6-7 hours of streaming every single day. So having a player who has a full-time job on the side, that's basically what it was. And for me, I didn't deal with that all that well. And we need to find for future better ways of staying in touch and better ways of keeping that kind of contact open. So here, I don't know what we're going to do. I'm going to have a meeting with him in the next couple of days. to discuss it. But that was another thing that had a big negative impact. And it was a lot around even just my approach going in. Like, I knew obviously he's a streamer. I don't really watch anyone stream, so I didn't also watch him before, but hadn't factored in the kind of streamer that he is, which is that he streamed last year 360 days. That's why people watch him, because he's just always on.
He's always there. Yeah.
And he's always entertaining, and he's always on, and he'll always be there playing games, basically, which is incredible. Exactly, but also makes it very hard to balance. So he's like the hardest working person that I've worked with, and yet also from my side, it feels like, oh, he's not replying to messages, he's not doing this individual thing that we wanted to do, or he's not replied to this team thing that was going to happen, and all this kind of stuff. And it feels like, oh, he's lazy. It's like, no, he's just got a full-time job. So that was another thing I think that hurt our performance. But a lot of that is just for the future will be, firstly, we need to talk about it again. I need to convey to him how important it is to just being able to reply to stuff, even if it's like, okay, once a day I can reply, it was work and I go through my emails. But also I just need to change the way it works. And I was gradually doing it throughout the split, but over the course of the whole split, it had a quite big negative impact, I think, on our performance.
Right. That's really interesting. But I was thinking, as you said there, I was thinking of time boxing. So just both of you having a mutual understanding of when to expect to reply, and hopefully that taking some of the pressure off both sides. So you know that between a time window of lunch break or evening between 7 and 9, you can expect to reply, but there'll be downtime where it's complete radio silence. So tough one.
Yeah, it's also just like the amount of messages, So when we're at the boot camp, for example, because I'd heard, okay, look, he won't be able to reply to Discord messages. And you think like, oh, come on, you could still spend some time each day just going through Discord messages. I looked at his Discord because we were obviously in the same place, like 200 requests, like constantly. It just never stops. So the number is just like ticking up and up and up and up. So like that's a very, very understandable situation. So he's got a manager that I can go through, but also I want to explore either something that I've tried to do before, which is this daily reflections thing, and try and work out a way for it to work with him like more officially, and put in place like, okay, you have to do this many times, rather than being a bit more fluid, which is what we were. Or the other thing is just find a time where we can say, right, every week we're going to meet at this time, even if it's just for 5 minutes, just to make sure we have that kind of point of contact. But it will be much easier now that there's a non-streamed scrim day, because in front of how many, like 5,000 people, I don't want to be like, let's have a little meeting and talk admin for a bit, because you're going to have to mute and everyone's going to sit there watching your mouth move for a while, which would just be really, really boring. Whereas on an off-stream day, I can just say, look, let's take some time to meet, and it's just more a kind of thing for me. So that's going to be the reason why this isn't going to appear on the board next time.
Okay.
That's actually, if you're listening to this and you want to do me a favor, well, actually, I can do it. I'll be doing it as well, of course. But write these down as we go. And next time, we have to make sure that none of the ones underneath have reappeared. That would be, that's coaching. A success from from a coaching point of view. Like, that's a success. If I can just make sure all the things that hurt us last time don't happen again, then I'm happy.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's level 2. Just a couple of things around that. Then level 3, or I guess I should say, like, it was minus, like, how many levels have I got? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 levels. So -6 was level of scrims. -5 was balancing No Way's full-time job alongside this. Then number -4 is stuff that we've touched on before, which was the bootcamp and the bootcamp organization. So the bootcamp didn't really go particularly well. It was not organized particularly well from the organization side of things. So it was a little bit confusing. It was basically at best a waste, but to be honest, it was not productive, really, for all the reasons that we discussed in our previous episode. So not having a agreed upon schedule, not knowing the stuff that can't move. So I didn't know when people could even be in the facility. And as it turned out, they could be in the facility 5 minutes before scrim started. So the only reason we were there, like we just played games together, and that's not a useful use of a boot camp, especially at that time. We did a few things. The bonding part was good. The team is amazing and great fun to be around. So that part was great. And it was kind of lucky that they were so adult and forgiving about the whole thing, because I think if they were a bit younger, everyone would just be really pissed off the whole time. And then the media day was just really, really unproductive for the output compared to what it costs the organization, both in terms of money, but also in terms of 10 people doing nothing all day to produce a 1 minute video is quite something. So that was a shame. The other thing on this level is also didn't do enough.
1 second.
Yeah.
It's I mean, this is a serious level, -4
Yeah.
in the elevator system. -4
Yeah.
is like, it carries some weight. So the boot camp, how it was run, do you think there was some detrimental aspects to it, or it's just like the opportunity cost of doing that over what you could have got if you
mostly opportunity cost and financial cost.
Yeah, okay.
So of course, because it's a small organization, people aren't being paid and all that kind of thing. A massive percentage of what was spent this split was spent on that.
Okay.
From my point of view, I would say probably it was better than if you could just delete the week. But it's definitely not better than just another week online with the way it happened.
Right.
So,
and if you moved it, if you could have had it at the beginning, that would have been better.
A million times better. Yeah. Okay. If it had been organized properly and clear about what we were trying to achieve, and at the beginning, it would be great. Or again, organized properly, clear about what we want to achieve, and near the end, that would also work. So what we're going to do this time, if we do one, which I'm not sure, is we're going to do like performance boot camp, not a kind of culture boot camp. And that was the big thing, is that it wasn't really clear about what it was. Because from my point of view, it was very clear that it was supposed to be a culture one, because when I first joined, I was told we're going to do it as the first thing. That was the original plan. Before we do any scrims, we're going to have a boot camp. Okay, the boot camp got delayed. That to me means it's still about doing the culture stuff. But I found out very late on that basically that's not what other people thought of it. They thought of it as a time to come together and scrim. Whereas what we're going to do this time, if we do one, is going to be much more like a classic playoffs one. So same as what Los Ratones did this split, which is we go to where the finals are the week before. And then we have a week where the idea is we're coming together to play. We're not coming together to do the culture stuff because it's a week before the finals. But also that means when it comes to the finals, we just have to travel an hour or 20 minutes rather than all fly for ages days before and all arrive at different times and all this kind of, the travel day is done far away from the competition day. So that's the plan kind of going forward for next split.
Great. Yeah, it's like get to the Olympic Village in time.
Exactly.
To settle in.
Yeah, exactly. Get to the Olympic Village a week before.
Yeah.
Much, much better. So the other thing at this level is there was not enough individual work, like me and a player. I can come into a little bit why that is. Partly it came from the players, partly it came from myself as well. A lot of it came from the way things just happened throughout the split. So that's another big one, another big kind of -4 level. That, to be honest, ties into the -5 one as well. It was very difficult to organize time with Freddie, especially.
Difficult because of the constraints of like the situational.
Difficult because of the constraints of the situation, but also another one that's coming into the next level as well, which I guess probably should be in this level, is that we had a strategic coach come on. But again, because we've got no money, we couldn't employ someone to do it. So they had a full-time job. And originally, they were going to do all the individual sessions with players and help me with scrims. That was their main tasks. But basically, they had a massive problem at their real job, which obviously takes precedence, and so I had to take I think even leave of absence from that, but it was quite a thing. And so not only did it not happen, but also didn't even tell me for a week that it wasn't going to happen. And then also I'd given it to someone else. So even mentally, I hadn't thought about how I'm going to do it, hadn't prepared to do it already, all this kind of thing. And so when that fell away, it was a bit and because it was already halfway through the season, it wasn't set out from the very beginning. So I had to chase people to be like, when can we do this? What can we do? All this kind of stuff. And they'd already started with this other person. So there was loads of reasons why it kind of didn't happen. But the fact that it didn't happen, I think, was quite negative.
Yeah, tough. Hopefully something that's just one of those things. It won't be something that's going to happen.
Well, yeah, what we're going to do for next split is we're going to change the way that we're doing the coaching setup a little bit, which will help with this, which is that before I wanted to try this idea, which I do still think is the future, of having a head coach who's a bigger part of their job is working with the other coaches and sort of almost like a line manager type thing. Because I think that's absolutely the future. It's also a role I really want to do. However, in the situation that we have, we can't really do that. So we're instead going back to the other model, and I'm just going to be the coach. And it might just be me, but it might be me and one other person. And so we're going to cut everything back, which means I won't think there's someone to do it.
Yeah.
So I'll do it. And I'll put in things to do it from the very beginning. And I'll, have a chat with the player every week. It also helped, to be honest, to do night scrims so that during the day I can do a session with a player, for example. And I'm already thinking about how I'm going to do it and how it will be different with each person. But we also might find a few other players who can help our players. I won't say who yet, because we hope to be public about it. So you can hopefully watch our players get coached by other players.
Cool.
Which would be fun. That's the individual stuff.
Great. All sounds like we have a good remedy for these things.
Hopefully.
And it is, it's interesting, always interesting to me to see the balance of the different sort of modes of training that players receive. And your rating here is that not having that individual time with you, between you and a player, was quite detrimental to overall team performance. I think I've read different accounts of it in research and in practice about the value that players put on individual time with staff, because they value the scrim. Sometimes they value the solo queue aspect, so just themselves working on their things. They value watching other players, so jumping on Twitch, for example. And there's, for me, there's always that sort of difference of opinion, or not quite. People aren't really saying I've always benefited from one-to-one with the coach, but then sometimes you see very high-profile players saying that having this coach sit down with me, give me their time, was super valuable. So it's really, I think it's interesting to see that it had a real impact in your eyes.
Yeah, so, from my point of view, I think it's unbelievably productive. I think we've spoken about this before, but I think individual learning of group tasks is actually more productive in League of Legends, almost always, than scrims. Yeah, maybe not not the playing part of scrims. I'm actually a big believer in the playing part of scrims being great. Okay. I think the playing part of scrims is the best time that we spend together as a team.
Right.
But I'm not precious about the day of scrims and 20-minute review game, 20-minute review game. That part can piss off. That part is less I think is less useful than working with a player. And I think it depends on the coach. I think the coach needs to have a proper system of how they see the game so that they can actually make sure that we're getting everyone to do the same thing rather than moving people off on different sides. And then I think it's the most productive, because it's so easy to think you understand and not understand as a group. And that happens almost all the time. But also, it's just the things that you need to do are very specific to you. And so what do we do about that as a group? And like I said before, I think a majority of scrims or games come down to one person just not knowing their role in the game, in this moment. Like you engaged when you shouldn't have engaged, or you needed to peel and you didn't, or something like that. You played aggressively on this wave when you needed to play passively on this wave, or something like that. And that is not only harder to get to as a group, it's also not useful for anyone else. So for me, the individual work is really up there. So a full day of scrims off stream, a couple of night blocks on stream, individual work, for me, I would take that over 5 days of scrimming every day kind of thing.
Yeah.
Even though it's much less time. It's of course, depending on how the individual sessions are done, they can be quite time consuming for a coach. I think, again, if we're talking about a full-time team and we're talking about if I could do this line manager thing, I would have 5 coaches who take responsibility for certain processes, but also a position. But the idea would be is that those coaches put a lot of time in by themselves so that the time that they spend with the player is as efficient as possible. Whereas I don't think I'll be able to do that. I'll probably be sitting down and watching a whole game with someone, and we'll be skipping forward and there'll be dead time, but it will also be, after the hour or after the 50 minutes, or whatever it is, there's some good takeaways as well.
Yeah. I really like the way you articulated that. And there's some interesting psychological theory you could apply to this in the form of a phenomena called social loafing. So if you're talking to a group and maybe you're telling the group there is a task that needs to be done, if you've got quite a large group, or maybe any kind of group, there is a chance that there are people within the group that feel like it's not maybe their responsibility. So if you're talking to an individual, obviously it is on them to take accountability for that task. So I think the way you've articulated that is actually really, it makes a lot of sense. So rather than just throwing out a wish list of things that you'd like the team to do, you're sitting down with an individual and you're saying, it's your task, your responsibility to take care of this, and what do you think about this, and you're getting feedback and all that kind of stuff. So it's very clear the feedback and whose job it is and what you'd like to see from them. So I think that clarity is really valuable. So that makes a ton of sense, the way you articulated that.
And we've spoken before about Duffman, for example, talked a lot about his role being building a shared vocabulary and actually taking the information from the players' heads and actually, okay, I'm going to build like kind of a system with your information, but my creativity or structure that allows you to approach the situation the same next time. Once you've done that, you can then, I won't use examples of who we might have for next split because it's not official yet. But let's say there's someone who's going to be sort of the leader of a team. Then from my point of view, I obviously want them to be working with the other players. But the other thing that I can do is I can work with them and get really clear with them on how they see the game. And then I can then take that to other players on an individual basis. Might be easier actually than taking it to them in the group kind of setting. So it's much easier to see like, okay, here's the bit of the system that you don't quite understand. Like, what's your role in this situation? Whether it's like, okay, how aggressive are we going to be with trades when we're playing on the other side of the map, for example? That was something we were really bad at. And I think that actually is easier to be fixed from a kind of individual side of things.
Certainly. And especially if you've got a lot of trust in that coach-athlete relationship where the player is able to, for want of a better phrase, be vulnerable. Like they'll be able to share ideas that maybe they're not so certain about. And in that one-to-one environment, if there's trust there, I think you'll probably get to the bottom of it a lot quicker. Whereas if they're in a
100%.
setting, maybe they don't want to expose that in front of their peers. Yeah.
Great point. I think that actually is the thing that holds so many teams back. The fact that we're afraid of making mistakes in our thinking in front of the group. One of the non-negotiables for me, or the things that I strive for at the highest, non-negotiables, I agree with you, is not a great word, especially for something like this. But you know what I mean? The thing that's going to go on the wall, if we only have a couple of things on the wall, is that we should try and create an environment where we're unafraid of making mistakes. And the reason I say that is because I don't think I've ever seen something even close in esports. And you occasionally have those kind of conversations, and just you can come on leaps and bounds in those conversations. Like, okay, I won't say even the team. There was a team that I was on that was very dysfunctional around this kind of stuff. But there was one point where I had a conversation with two of the people who got on really well together. And the three of us between us, I'm pretty sure in that one conversation kind of sort of worked out how we were going to play for a year. And it's like, imagine if we had not had that conversation as well. So finding those situations where between the two of you or the three of you or however many people are there, you can genuinely think freely and speak freely. That's fantastic. That's like the most useful time we're ever going to have. So
Yeah.
anytime I can find those moments is good.
Yeah. I feel like, can I give a shout out to a previous team?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Working with Team Singularity in the NLC in 2021 or 2 with Torok and Kiao and the guys we had on the roster. It was a very harmonious group, and they were very supportive of each other. And I don't think there was just a strong sense of support. And if there was a misunderstanding or an opinion that was aired that wasn't generally perceived to be correct, there was a really nice atmosphere in that team around, let's work through that perspective, and maybe there is some sense to it, and let's not just reject it or criticize, and we want to hear it. And it was lovely to be part of. So I was shout out to that team because that was really fun. Anyway, emotional bit over.
Yeah. Okay. We'll go to wait, what were we? 6, 5, 4, -3. Now we are level -3 for those keeping track. This one was the organization of scrims. So it does tie into the level of scrims, of course, but there was just some decent amount of confusion around when were we scrimming, what time, who were we going to scrim, who's booking it, what TR are we on, all those kind of things. And maybe -3 is too low, too much impact. I think probably actually it is, because it's just hard to untangle it from the fact that scrims were the worst thing.
Right.
But the big thing from that was that there were like times where multiple people were booking them, because one person's like friends with the team that we're going to play, but they're not the one officially booking. And so they told them one thing and we got told a different thing. And then it's all ends up being a bit kind of confusing. And so it's not so much of a problem in itself, but it also tied into the level of scrims, because it felt a bit confusing at all times and never felt like clear. It was never like obvious what was going to happen. Whereas again, 2 weeks in advance, one person doing everything. Anyone who asks for a scrim, like you send them to them. That's the kind of more standard thing. So I spoke with a bunch of coaches about practicing with them, and every time they're like, yeah, sounds good. Here's my manager's Discord. Like, not, okay, here's good. So we do it on this day. Like, like that's the way to do it.
Clear
we should have done
division
the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds, I think that's a definite -3, -4. That sounds pretty. I could imagine just general confusion around that kind of stuff doesn't breed a harmonious atmosphere. So yeah, I can imagine.
Okay.
How are you? So you're solving that with a clear sort of role for that.
Yes. Only one person is going to be booking scrims for us. Everyone else is just going to like send people to them.
Yeah.
Now, we did kind of say this stuff before, just like we talked about making sure we have high level scrims, but it is still important when it doesn't go well, even if you did talk about it, to like re-talk about it and say like, look, okay, it's just going to be more clear, hopefully. And also if scrims are being confusing, we will go to the person who is booking scrims and say, look, this is not good enough. It needs to be this, and this, because it's clear now who is responsible for it and what exactly they're going to do. So I actually need to have a proper long meeting with them as well, but I will do. So I'm saying it like I've done that already.
Perfect. I mean, that's also 101 from the coaching textbook, role clarity. Make sure people on the team know who to go to for what information and who's responsible for what. And yeah, division of labor, make sure that's clear as possible. So sounds very healthy.
Hopefully. Okay, so the next level up, next level closer. And again, I think, to be honest, the levels with this one, I didn't put all that much emphasis on. I normally do that when I'm doing it with other people, to get what they felt about it. Whereas when it's just me, I'm the only person doing this reflection exercise, the levels are less important because I want them all to be fixed, and they all can be fixed, but I want them all to be fixed. So on this, we had how we approached drafting at the beginning of the split. Took us, I think, quite a while to get to a good point. But that one we already fixed during the season, but it's important to put on the list anyway. So we're going to continue as we finished last split with being much more focused on like compositions, much less focused on champions, much more focused on taking a couple of things early and then building a Nocturne comp or a Rumble comp rather than like other things around that. And just the processes that we were doing at the end is what we're going to carry on with. So that's a kind of easy fix. The next one,
I mean, just to point out on that though, it is also just good to know what works for your team as a coach. I think sometimes we don't know when we've achieved a phase in our team that we might call performing. We don't always know what got us there or why. So to be able to pinpoint that and maintain it.
The other thing though as well, which is worth knowing, although nothing we can do about it before we start, is that roster is changing, so drafting will change. And Treats is the one who's publicly going somewhere else. He is, I think, the easiest player that I've ever experienced to draft with and for. And so not having him will obviously have an impact. Although also, actually, to be honest, the other players who are like the easiest are also on the team. So I think Santorin also brings a huge amount to the draft. I think Chachi is really clear about what he wants in the draft. So I'm not saying it will suddenly change completely, but it is also worth knowing. You swap some players out and suddenly the dynamic is different. So we will need to kind of find it again. But there's nothing more that we can do other than start with the best practice that we ended with. For last split. And it's also worth doing this reflection exercise to think, does it need to keep changing? Was it good enough? Not only just the output, but how we got to those outputs. And I think it was, and also everyone else's feedback was that it was. So we're going to keep, start as we mean to go on and hopefully keep getting better at it as we go, but starting from that basis rather than starting from nothing. Or just trying it all over again.
Great. The next one, I'm curious about this one.
Yeah. So the next one is my performance at finals. That's what I put here. I put it as -2, and I'm thinking -2 for the whole split. That may be harsh, but I'm always going to be harsh on myself. So, yeah. How best to discuss this? So I talked about it already, actually, in the Q&A that I did recently. I was reflecting back on it, very unhappy with my performance at the finals that we had in Nottingham. I've been trying to work out how to describe it best. From my point of view, it was like I fell back into bad habits of what I would have done a couple of years ago before I took a break from coaching teams, before I dove very, very deeply into coaching theory and spent a lot of time like self-reflecting and doing these kind of exercises and working with other coaches and thinking through what I want, all those kind of things. And so actually, when I recorded a message to the team and said, I just want to say, I was really unhappy with my performance at finals and I apologize for it. And next time it will be better and this and this and this. They all had very nice things to say. Obviously, they're trying to help. They're trying to make me feel better as well. They all have very nice things to say because I don't think it was particularly different from a lot of standard coaching. But for me, that's not the standard that I want to hold myself to.
Okay.
So I guess this one sentence way to describe it is that I was completely reactive. And I don't like that. And I don't want to be reactive as a coach. So what I didn't do was I didn't think through what are the possible things that I can impact during this weekend and how am I going to set up some processes so that I can have the best positive impact on those things. So it's stuff like, okay, after the game, I didn't have a specific process of like this happens, then this happens, then this happens, then this happens. So what actually happened was the players gradually came up to the room where we were doing drafting. We chatted about the draft. We got a bit to eat. We went to the next game. And again, I think the drafts were all good over the weekend. So that's what a lot of people are thinking about. And that's maybe what a lot of times happens. But for me, that's not enough, because it got to the point where I was seeing things happen around me. I was seeing that certain players were maybe struggling, maybe needed like a word, maybe needed some help, either about the game specifically or about just their kind of mental state. But I didn't feel comfortable doing that, because if it's the first time you do it, it's suddenly a massive thing. So if after game 2 against Los Ratones, I take a player aside, it's suddenly like, what's happening? Like, why is this, both for the player and for everyone else? The player is like, oh my God, it's over. I'm
being
doomed. I'm
singled
being
out.
singled out. And the other people are like, oh, what's happening with this player? Like, is it okay? Like it's such a big deal. Whereas what I needed to do was just set up a process where, okay, even since I've thought what I would do differently, after the game, firstly, I come down to the stage before we end so that I'm ready to go straight away. I talk with each player individually about how they're feeling, just like a sort of temperature check. Then we go outside for a bit, standing up, moving around, getting some fresh air. Then we discuss draft, or then we go back to the room and discuss draft. Then we come down, and as we're coming down to the stage, I give them maybe one thing gameplay wise to focus on for next game. And just doing that process every time in the quote unquote easy games first, so that in the hard games, the process is already there, is what I should have done.
Right.
And this is why having someone, a shameless plug, this is why having someone working with you as a coach, supporting you as a coach, is unbelievably valuable, because I know for sure if I had have had someone, which I had for the first half of the split, but not the second half, I wouldn't have made this mistake. Because it just needs, okay, you're going to finals. What are you doing for finals? It just needs that, honestly. Like, it just needs that small prompting from someone else on the outside for me to think through what I want to do over this weekend. And of course, I've got loads of excuses, right? Like, I wasn't there the day before. That's not a bad decision. It was my wife's birthday, so I skipped the NLC Media Day. Very grateful they even let me do that. Then I was traveling from like 1 p.m. in the afternoon until like midnight, because it took way longer than it should have done. The travel wasn't all that good, and I was preparing the draft, and the Airbnb wasn't perfect, and I woke up at 6 because the match was super early, so we got to the studio really fast, and then we were already starting. And, I got many excuses, but the main thing is that like I just didn't think about it. I just didn't sit down and think, what should I have done? What can I do here? So yeah, that's also an easy fix. Next time I'm going to do that.
But I mean, it's you've gone through that experience and you're reflecting on it. So like, this is the best way to bounce back from that, I think. And it's I think it shows that you've thought a lot about the coaching process and the experience of players, that you're even thinking about the need to introduce these aspects of coaching rather than just spring them on players in the moment where they might draw the wrong conclusions. So making it a controllable, proactive process, as you say, I think that's a real testament to your ability to think about coaching. So, but on the flip side, I'd also say I could imagine that your presence wasn't a disaster. So this is a -2 impact thing, and I could imagine that the way you conducted yourself was probably offered some stability. And I could imagine you didn't do anything eccentric, and I think maybe the players as well in that environment, maybe stability was also a good thing. So and it's it's not a typically in-person team, so there was a lot of novelty in however you conducted yourself. There was a lot of novelty for that team. So yeah, challenging, but I do generally agree with the idea of like introducing things in advance, planning your behavior. I think is such a big one for coaches. Like, how do you want to be? I've experienced it myself, often taking teams to tournaments in traditional sports, and just it's actually like not the game coaching that's the thing. It's the between games, the downtime. Like when you're waiting for the next round of play and you're sitting in the stands watching a team, do you want to be there, chugging a Coke and eating a hot dog and watching YouTube on your phone, or do you want to be locked into the game, taking notes to show your players that you're focused and ready to go and doing everything you can to prep and things like that. And even planned corridor conversations. So like, as you say, who do you want to pull aside, but you don't want to make it seem like a standout scolding. So you want to make it routine for everyone and a normal part of business. It's all things that we can think about and plan ahead. And that's, I think, phenomenal coaching if you can do that. So great.
Yeah, so that will be the plan for next time. And of course, if we do happen to organize things so that we're there for the week before, that'll make things a million times easier, because I want to get to the facility whenever we're allowed to and explore it and go through with the team. Here's like a dry run of what we're going to do. And I might even literally do a dry run. So if I'm there for the media day, for example, I will say, okay, look, what I want to do is I want to run us through what's going to happen after every game. This is like, I don't time it. This is how long it takes us to get outside. This is how much time we can spend outside so that we can get back to the room. Do we even need to go back to the room? In which case, have we got a laptop or something to do the rest outside? And depend how it'll be a bit warmer by then. So maybe it's better to do it like that. But yeah, doing an actual kind of dry run and those kind of things. And then of course it's fearless. So I do have to spend a lot of time just thinking and talking about draft for the next time. And that would be the advantage of having someone else do it. But not the situation that I think we will be in. So something to bear in mind.
Great.
Cool. So other things at this level, one of these definitely shouldn't be at this level now I'm thinking about it, or two of them. First one is already mentioned, strategic coach, just a problem, disappeared. Nothing we can do about that other than for next split, we're not going to even try and do the management of having a bunch of other people, which is a bit of a shame, but still there's the situation that we've got. So that one still is worth putting on there in these kind of exercises, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything you can do about it for the future.
Yeah.
I guess technically we are doing something about it for the future, but just worth having down.
Yeah.
The next thing for me I put here is sort of confusing direction. Again, that was a bit of a bigger problem at the beginning of the split. It comes to stuff like the boot camp as well, where what are we actually trying to achieve in the boot camp? But the other thing for me is like, what are we trying to achieve as a team? So of course, this team, the average age was something like, Matt was our youngest player at 24. I think after that, the next youngest was like 28 or something. So these are not young, inexperienced players. A lot of them have been, I think, there's over 50 years of competitive experience between the five of them, because Matt might have 6, but both Santorin and Vizicachi have been playing professionally since like for 12 years or something. So they make up for it. So I was never going to baby them around anything. And when we came together at the beginning, we said we wanted to win. And that's why people would watch us, because we wanted to take it seriously and we wanted to win. And so therefore, I was assuming that's how we would behave. And it wasn't. And it's completely reasonable that it wasn't. It's a free team. No one's being paid. Everyone's here because they've got reasons to be here. Like, this is the team that lets me live at home and live with my wife, or this is the team that lets me, spend more time with my girlfriend, or all those kind of things. And so for me, if we say we're trying to win, I didn't even realize we were part-time because I'm like, well, then we're not trying to win, are we? Like, we're not going to dedicate full time to this, so we're not doing everything we can to win. And so for me, that was a lot of confusion, especially early on, where I was expecting people would be doing stuff like grinding solo queue, looking at things individually, talking amongst themselves, finding individual coaching, all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't what was happening. But also for me, I just don't like us being dishonest with ourselves. So even partway through the split, we came together and said, like, what are we going to do? And the idea was, like, we're going to win. It's like, yeah, but guys, we're playing against a team of also very good players. What they are going to do to win is in the 2 weeks before leading up to the finals, not only do they play 5 games every single day, they also played 3 games in the morning off stream so that they could hide some picks. And what we did to win was just the same as what we had been doing, with also the worst scrim opponents for our split, So for me, I'd like to have that kind of consistency. I think is a a big one. And yes, this was more damaging at the beginning than the end. The confusion around it, not the fact that we were doing it, of course. Like I said, the biggest gap between us and Lost Ratones was the end. They did more scrims in like 2 days than we did over the last 3 weeks. But the negative side for me was actually the confusion kind of early on. And it was a conversation at the boot camp where I was talking to someone and they were like, but when we came together, we agreed we were going to play 2 scrim days a week. And I was like, huh? Did we? Because I actually wasn't in that conversation. The only conversation I was in the one where we came together and agreed that we would win.
We want to win.
Yeah.
So is the revision point there, or the point to take forward? Is that to set goals accordingly, or set expectations that are more realistic, or is it to still strive to win, but we accept
for me
lower...
for me it's to even have the conversation properly.
Okay.
And this time when we have the conversation, especially we're going to have some new players, of course, as everyone knows, at least one. When we have that conversation, I want us to be clear about it, and I will push back on we want to win as an easy answer.
Right.
Because if we say we want to win, how are we going to act like we want to win? And we also, even saying you want to win and saying we're also part-time is for me is already that's something else. So we want to do as well as possible while being part-time is a fine goal, but let's be honest about it. And then we can say, okay, how do we do as well as possible while being part-time? That also can be another very interesting discussion to have. But the main thing for me is just I'm not going to treat it like that we're doing everything we can. So that's already a useful thing to know for going forward.
Certainly, yeah. Like you say, I think the best we can conversation is really good. What are the strengths we have that could help us shock the world and win, and how can we play to them? But then, recognizing that we have these situational constraints. So that sounds very healthy. And I think just as a side point, just as a general coaching point, this idea of direction and a vision and having a North Star to work towards, that comes up time and time again with what is the coaching role. And so the fact that you weren't in those initial conversations, you can see how there's like some...
Yeah, so I tried to have those initial conversations without realizing that they'd been had without me.
They'd taken place. Yeah, that's...
Yeah, but
I think
they
whenever
hadn't...
a new coach was involved,
they hadn't taken place in terms of what the people thought. That's another big thing. Like, I don't think people were lying when they said we want to win. Just for me, you have to be... Like, our actions weren't a team that wanted to win as the highest value, because at the very least, the highest value is I want some time off, which is, again, completely reasonable. And so I think a more appropriate goal is do as well as possible while committing not full time to it. So it was not a thing of them like they all just lied. It's definitely just a different way of thinking about things, and for me I think it's good to be clear on it. Okay, then the last one at this level, which it probably shouldn't be at this level because I have no idea if it would have been useful. I've spoken about this a little bit before because I think we're unlikely to do it again, although we still could. I think it'd still be useful. Is we prepared a specific like cheese strat to do against Lost Ratones. And I said, this is the part that I absolutely would not change. I'm not doing this unless everyone agrees to do it. But the thing that I would like to have changed is to be more convincing so that everyone agreed to it.
Right.
And obviously I'm saying that because we got 3-0'd anyway. But, there's other worlds where we didn't get 3-0'd this way and when it was 3-2 and really close. And if we'd have done the cheese, we would have gone 0-3. So there's no way to know actually if it would have been better. Yeah. That's my biggest regret for the season is that I didn't manage to convince people to give this a try. And since then, I've thought of much better arguments than I thought of at the time, which is unfortunate. Obviously, some of those arguments are only gained by the fact that I've seen their behind the scenes. and I
Yeah.
know that it would have been useful. But yeah, I could explain a bit more about it, but I have spoken about it before.
Yeah,
It's a bit game
I
specific.
would love to hear it. Does that tie into John at finals? It's like a specific example of John at finals, like your
No, I don't
persuasion.
think so.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, like I said, it happened at finals, and so I could have done
Yeah.
it better, but I was pretty happy with what it was. So the idea was that it's fearless now. If someone picks a champion, no one else can pick it. The idea that we were going to throw the first game just to pick 5 champions. So the 5 champions make 0 sense together. We would 100% lose the game. But for the rest of the series, no one can play those 5 champions. That was the basic idea. So we're going to take away 5 champions from an opponent, one specific player on the enemy team. And what I did is I prepared that, and then I prepared future drafts. And the things that I think I really missed, I think, have some really good reasons, and a lot of the players were convinced, but just not all. The other things that I missed, which I should have thought of, is that because they have more prep time than us, and because they're prepping off stream as well, they have an advantage. And what they actually did is, in the first game, they proved that they've been prepping stuff secretly, which was the best thing to do. It was a really good idea, because that means for every other draft, I said, okay, they could take Corky here, and then a player's like, oh, that has to go bot. And I was like, well, kind of, but also Cho'Gath has to go top, guys. So he didn't. So what are we gonna you add that doubt in.
Yeah.
But if you'd have done this, the whole series, no one has any experience playing a series like that, where in the first game, there's 7 champions gone from one position. No one's played that. So now we're both starting from 0. So all your extra prep isn't as useful as it was, which I didn't say. Then the other thing is that I prepared the next draft, because the other advantage from my point of view is I would say, well, we already know in game 2 which side we are, because we know we're going to lose. So we know what side we can pick. So we can already prep game 2. And I was prepping game 2 for blue side, because that's the strongest side by a substantial margin. But it's the strongest side in a normal game. And thinking about it now, actually, it's the weaker side if you have 7 champions gone from a specific role. So you can so I was prepping what happens if we just power pick the last things left. And that's okay, but it's better to just say, what if we just go red side and we just counter pick? And yeah, he's got maybe 1 or 2 power picks left, but he has to blind them, and we can ban them if they ban counters. So those are the 2 things that I think I should have done, added on to all the other things that I did. But I have to admit, and I did this then as well, the reason that obviously players don't want to do this thing is often about ego underneath it all, because if you're doing a whole strategy to target one specific player, it makes the other player feel a bit like, well, can't I just deal with them? And they also can as well. So that's the other thing. But it was also the reason I want to do it is ego for a coach, because no one's done it yet. So I think it's fun. I think it's a hilarious idea, and it would have been great fun. And if it went horribly, it would have been fun. And I genuinely do think it was the best approach. But that's actually not true anymore, because without lane swaps, it's quite different, I think, is the best approach. So that's why I'm talking about it publicly, because I think it's very unlikely for us to come to the same conclusion again. But yeah, that's one for me. That's on the negative. But that's not really a process for the future. So this kind of thing actually is probably not really worth putting on this. But I did put it on.
Well, I think
some parts
the
of it are.
power, the persuasion.
Yes, that's the part that
an
is.
important
The
one.
cheese part
Yeah.
isn't. Yeah.
Like working on your powers of persuasion as a coach. It's one of the core tenets of a theory of motivation I lean on very heavily. Is just, are you able to provide a rationale to foster buy-in to what you want to do? And the best coaches can get that buy-in to a way of doing things that they want to see. So I think it's a worthy one to have on there.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about this level, right? These are all, the last 5 are all -2s.
Mm-hmm.
Do these all add up to be more important than any of the lower levels? So do you think that all of that together mattered more than level of scrims, or?
Probably not to level of scrims, but probably yes to the other ones.
Okay, so if you'd had the coach
So if
not
so
steering in
so
that direction.
more, if I'd have spent more time on it, I could have worked out that, maybe level of scrims is
Yes.
actually not -6, it's like minus this +1. So if these are
Okay.
-2, then it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So level of scrims is -11. So yes, it's more than all of them put together, but
Right.
the rest of them aren't, or something like that. I don't know what.
Unnecessary complexity from
Yeah,
me there.
yeah.
It's just an interesting one.
But just for fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll go through these next ones a little bit quicker. Some of them are a bit private that I don't want to talk about publicly,
Of course.
and also these are less impactful. I think we quite often had too long meetings. We have a tendency, especially with certain people, to spend 45 minutes talking about something that we all agree on, or like it should take 5 minutes. And I need to be kind of clear on that going forward, but I won't speak more about it. We had a bit of a problem sometimes, I think, with some of the players who were in a position to really help everyone else, but were much more interested in just like, I'm not going to go above and beyond. I'm going to do, that's again, comes back to the clarity on the wanting to win thing. And then more like taking care of themselves, which is again, completely reasonable, but still was a thing that hurt us. Then there was the fact that unfortunately none of the staff that we started working with, I felt comfortable giving them a whole big section of the team, which is completely understandable because we had no time to prep or search for people. We had no budget to attract people who would be able to do it really well. And also just, I'm very anal, I have very high standards. So,
And you didn't have much time to prep as a staff either. So,
yes.
yeah.
Didn't have very much time to prep as a staff, and I didn't have much time to be managing the staff because, so these are kind of tied together. So they're both add up to, unfortunately, not being able to do things the way I wanted to, which was more of my time is spent with the staff than with the team. And the staff are the ones who are then talking with the players. But in the end, I couldn't even integrate most of the staff to be able to regularly talk with the players and be comfortable with that, because I don't want them to get spammed by 5 different people, and I don't want them to get talked to by someone who I think is not going to give, I'm not sure is going to give, have a positive impact, rather than have just no impact. So,
or a mixed message. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Oh,
It's difficult. So that's a big unfortunate one, and I'm going to have to, just apologize to them basically for that, because I didn't have enough time to. I think if I could work with them, like as I've been working with other coaches, I could get them all to the level where it would be good. But I can't do that with 5 other people and also do all the coaching stuff on the team. So it was a bit of a shame.
Honestly, that I could imagine that one being more impactful. So this is a -1, but
I've
had experience of it myself in a performance role where if you can't be at every team meeting and you can't be at every scrim and you can't be in a lot of conversations and have your fingers on the pulse with the dynamics within the team, and then you pick it up every other day or every 3 or 4 days and you miss things about what's going on and your messaging, your communication is out of sync with what's been said, it can really impact a team, and it can either make your work seem really less significant, but it certainly makes it harder.
The reason that this is only -1 is for the team, it's -1. For the coaches, it would be much more, because my solution for that was none of them had any impact whatsoever.
Right.
Basically, I didn't let them talk with the players individually without me or do stuff with the players until I was comfortable, and I didn't have the time to make myself comfortable, so they didn't do anything instead. And so that
interesting that it's like, it's a -1, but if it was done well, it could be a huge plus.
Yeah, it could be, but it was, for me, just it was a -1 because it took more of my time away from doing stuff with the team, which I would have done with the team, but I didn't do it as a potential compared to what it would have been, because I just have no idea. There are people that it could have been a massive plus with, I'm sure, that exist, but there are also people that it could have been a big negative for them to do stuff with the team, and I didn't know which was going to be which. So, my solution was safer for the team than what you're describing, but much worse for the coaches, unfortunately. But of course, because we weren't paying them or anything like that, I didn't. Yeah, I think that was the best approach. going
Yeah.
forward. And in terms of what we're going to do next, that's the changing the staff. It's just going to be me and maybe one other person.
Yeah. Okay.
Then the last thing, which I think is important to talk about, but actually the fix is something I'm not sure I can talk about. Some of the roster decisions are the fix in a good way, is that we're too nice often. So we've spoken about this before, kind and nice. It was a very kind team, which I think was amazing. And you'll see the biggest positive we had was the team atmosphere, and it's a big part of that. But we were also too nice and not saying stuff that needed to be said and not saying stuff that we thought about other people. Like, okay, this person is really not putting the effort. They need to fix this problem that keeps happening over and over again. But when you're actually talking to them, it's more like, please fix it kind of thing. Or even nothing. And then telling me it's completely unacceptable that this person, like, okay, this needed to happen. This part needed to happen in public. Not in public, but like right then and there. Also in public would be useful often. So yeah, that was a -1. Even though the kindness of the team was the best thing,
Yeah.
we were too nice, and I really don't like that. I don't have time for that. I have a problem with it sometimes myself, especially in person, like as in not in person, as in not in work when I'm with other people, but don't have the time for that. And I think we have some potential people that will fix it and maybe try to bring it the other way, but that's okay because then I can sort of combat that. Whereas having 5 people on a team who are all quite unconfrontational and are very kind can lead to some problems like we had.
Yeah. So that's kind of in the direction of withholding feedback, information, ideas for fear of rocking the boat.
Yeah, maybe for fear of rocking the boat. I mean, maybe just like because they genuinely don't want to.
Right.
I don't think it's like being scared of confrontation necessarily. And also, I think as a bit of the clarity thing. So, okay, we all said we wanted to win, but we quite clearly are prioritizing the fact that this is, you've got other things going on, which again,
fun
is right that you've got other things going on. But if one player thought the other player didn't play enough solo queue or whatever, we also need to deal with that quicker rather than waiting until you're so angry about it that you're telling me about it. And saying it's completely unacceptable and makes me not want to try and all this kind of, it's like, okay, sure. And it's good that they told me and we did then try and deal with it, but it's like, we just took longer and caused more pain than it needed to because we just needed someone to be less nice. And you can do it in a kind way. And some of them did do some very direct feedback in very kind ways, which was perfect. But having someone there who's a bit more confrontational, I think will be good for the balance.
Okay. So
and my job, the remedy will be a lot to do with the roster, and for me, the balance could swing the other way. It could be that there's a -1 of the opposite next split. Basically.
Too critical, too harsh.
Too critical, but the thing for me will be to make sure that I empower people to be more direct and to be more quote unquote harsh or whatever it might be, and have that conversation about the direction early on so that we can say, look, okay, are we the kind of team that calls people out for not doing stuff? And the other thing as well, of course, is that it's much easier to do that offline. Not offline, that's the wrong word, like off stream.
Off stream, yeah.
Yeah, you say you have a go at someone on stream, and it can be weird, and also it's like it can obviously be weird from just a feeling point of view, but it is also different from a serious point of view. And so for me, having that one day without that can be a bit more serious, a bit more intense. That can be very useful.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. So it took an hour and 20 minutes, but we're crossing the line. We have obviously other stuff that we were going to go through, but we'll have to save that for next week, I think, because we still have some positives to get to. We shouldn't just be like whining the whole time.
Yeah, we're going to whiz through one positive note.
Yeah. And then the positive was that we came second. Done.
Yeah.
Despite all that, we still came second. No, there are, of course, loads of things that went really well. as I said, the plus 100 was the team atmosphere. This team was just my favorite team to work with by a mile. It was fun, but also for the most part sort of serious enough. It wasn't fun like we're all just messing about and being stupid. It was fun in a like, let's come together and enjoy getting good at League of Legends together, which
That's
was just
great.
really, really cool. I think a massive part of that was Freddie, but also everyone was just like the nicest team.
That's great.
Again, I should say the kindest team, definitely the kindest team that I've ever worked with, which was just really cool. And it just so happened like that. And so like the stuff that you guys, obviously you did see almost all the practice anyway, but even the stuff in person was even more so about it. And like we talked about, we did those interviews, not unfortunately with everybody, but people were just able to be really open and vulnerable about it and super supportive of each other and all those kind of things.
Yeah. There were some nice moments on your behind the scenes vlog. There was some, I think, the greetings with the players outside the studio or something. Like it looked like there was a warmth there in the like snapshot.
Massively.
So it's great.
Yeah, so it was really good. So we need to make sure that even if we do change some pieces, we have that. And for me, I'm obviously, like I said, I think Freddie no way is the kind of crucial part of that, and so he's staying around. So I think whatever roster we end up with, it can't be too negative because Freddie's there.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
He's a
nice
fantastic
to have that
person. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that
super
kind of
good to have on the team.
Excellent.
Okay. Then the one below that of things that just made us do good is just the level of the players. I mean, all the players were very good, but the one I had in mind when I wrote that was Santorin. I think like he's just so good at League of Legends, and it's really like I've worked with some very good junglers in the past, but I don't know how many LCS titles he has. It's just a different level, which was great fun, but also just strange. He's like, I would describe someone who's just cruising in all our scrims. Like he's just like 10-0, but it doesn't look like he's like really. He's just flowing, you know, which is just really fun. But all the players were just really, really good. Like the level was shockingly high, which I did think already looking at the roster. But also Freddie's level was much higher than I was expecting compared to other players who are more like, I'm there to be a competitive player. But I mean, against most of the teams, we were just miles better as players. And so obviously made my job much easier. And I do think, it does it also allows you to have way more openings in the draft and stuff. But yeah, I think just from a one-to-one matchup, we were always going to come like top 4, just from the strength of the roster. And if they got together and played together properly, it was always going to be like contesting top 3 with, like, I guess Ruddy's roster was very good, Verdant's roster was very good. But yeah, just the level of players was fantastic. So I think it's also worth, even though there's nothing we can do about that other than keep putting together good rosters, it is worth having there, because I think it's always worth being realistic about the world that we're in. It's when you're doing these kind of reflecting and coaching, it's also worth just being, I guess, grateful to be in the position to be working with these kind of players. And that's why I'm in this project, is just because you let me work with these players, like, and I'm on board. I don't really need to hear the rest.
And also, like, kudos to the organization for getting the players together, because I think identifying and assembling talent is also
especially with no money to do it. We had a the first time well, actually I said this to the head of esports as well when he told me the roster. He said they were still looking for a coach. I said, "Oh, what's your roster?" He said this. I was like, excuse me? How has this happened? And I had the same situation when I was first chat with Freddie, because he also didn't know. He was like, what is the deal with all these other, like, how are they playing with me? Kind of thing. Or like, how has this happened? So I think that's just good fun, and it's good to to enjoy that and have it on
Yeah.
here just to enjoy it, if nothing else.
Well said. That's maybe something that is also good for coaches to reflect on. Like when you have the opportunity to work with good players on a team that is good together, what a pleasure that is. And I think gratitude is like such an incredible just thing to keep in mind, being grateful for those opportunities, because we're involved in this because we like the sport, we like the game, and being around people that have invested significant time in developing skills in that game, it's great to see. It's great to be up close to, and I think as a coach to be able to interact with that is wonderful. So it's great to hear you say that and get to enjoy it. So
Yeah. Okay, and then the next things that are on the list. So third from the top is
+3
is
+2.
well, I guess so, but like I said plus 100 for the team atmosphere, so it's all out the window. Was the approach of treats and being able to do a bunch of VOD reviews with him. So he was the kind of in-game leader, if we had one, of the team, and we were able to just look at a bunch of games together. We did them on stream. Actually, it was great fun to do. You can find them on the YouTube. There's any of the ones that are linked with treats in. One or two we did with Matt as well, but I think we did sort of 6 or 7 games or something like that together, maybe more actually. And it was really fun, but it was also really good to do because it was about me understanding how he sees the game and also learning about the game from him, and vice versa, hopefully, and just getting like kind of on the same page around it. And for me, that's really good. And this one is important to have here because now we don't have him. Whoever stepped into that role of kind of leading us in the game, one of my top priorities is just like, let's just sit and watch some games together. Because that's something that, again, I think is really useful time and very easy to do when you're in person because there's a big screen normally, which you can put the games on, and much more difficult to do online. And so luckily, with the whole streaming thing, you can make it some content, which might be useful for the player, but we might also have someone who's co-streaming, in which case I might see if they will can I just jump on your co-stream and we'll just watch the game and chat because it's happening anyway, and using that as a way to get on the same page where it's not like this is a super serious thing. It's more like this is some fun time that we can spend together while we happen to be, it's like 50% work, 50% fun, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite 50-50, but not as intense as like, let's break down one of our games and look at the ROFL file, but just like, let's just watch and chat as we go. And like, oh, what would you have done here? Or like, oh, I think that move is terrible. Like, what do you think about that? Like all those kind of things. So making sure we do that, and especially with the person who's going to be our next sort of in-game leader. So I don't know who that will be. It depends on the roster, of course. But yeah, working with them will be great, and I'll try and do it in the same way because it was really, really successful.
Excellent. That's really cool. I also really enjoy that idea of it's almost what you want out of a good team bonding session, but it's way more contextualized. Like it's still relevant to the game, and you still get an understanding for how they see the game and like what stands out to that person. And it's not completely decontextualized in the sense that you're not working on problem solving for a board game that's got no relevance to the competitive medium that you're in. So I really like that. Yeah, nice.
Cool. The other thing on here was the way we got drafting later, which we've already kind of covered. So we're going to start with the same thing.
Where did that come from again? I don't know if you mentioned earlier. Where did that you decided team composition was much better, but was that just a hunch? Was it just like intuitive?
No, we already talked about it a lot. And we decided that was the way to go, but it was actually kind of doing it in practice. And we also changed the actual process of the draft as well. So those were the kind of big things that changed, and we're going to keep with the updated process. And part of that updated process is a focus much more on comps and stuff like that.
Okay, great.
Cool. And then the last two for pluses. The first was the way that we did scouting with Kiao. I think that was really useful.
Awesome.
I think it was quite effective. He basically made short videos rather than trying to put everything in one thing, we gradually work together on, okay, like why is that information, like the information doesn't need to be connected. So here's a short thing about the level ones as its own video. Here's a short thing about their jungle pathing. It's its own video. Here's the stuff about the draft. It's its own video. And I think that worked well, and we'll keep doing that in the same way. And I think it was useful for us to, even while being part-time and even while not having a time where we can come together and talk about it, because of course you can't stream that. Having his short videos were good. I don't know if he already has. I've been trying to convince him to put them all online, which I think would be worth doing, just because it's interesting. So that was useful.
Brilliant.
As well, and we'll just keep it up.
Always happy to see. I love to see Coach K doing well.
Yeah.
And scouting is such a lot of heavy lifting sometimes. Like the amount
you have to and watch, a lot of time. Yeah.
So, yeah. That's great.
Yeah, and it's hard to work out exactly what you're going to take from it. So that's a big one for me. Like, how do we find exactly what we actually are going to do with this information, and what information are we going to do? Are we going to take? Sorry, I think is a really big one.
Yeah. How did you approach that? Did you assign it to certain players, or did you expect?
No, I assigned it to him. Oh, to watch it. Watching was he asked them what kind of things do you want in the scouting, and he updated it based on that. So, for example, Lucas was the one saying, "Yeah, I do want to see their jungle path thing, even if it's just a couple of games, just in case something comes up." So I can just have it in my head, even if I don't focus on it. It's not like he's written down and he knows exactly where the person's going to be, because that's not how the game works. Because where the person's going to be is more based on the game than on past patterns. So he knows where they're going to be anyway. But yeah, he said that's still useful for me. I want to see that. And everyone else was like, well, put it on the Discord and we'll watch it if we want to watch it. And then other things where it was like, if there was a specific play, it was just everybody. So we tried to keep the videos as short as possible, but it's like, okay, here's a minute thing on something to know from Verdant or from Lost Returns. And then people replied saying, we tried doing it with Loom for a while, which I couldn't quite get everyone exactly in on. Although I think it worked a bit, but not quite. Most people didn't want to try. So
it goes back to your ability to persuade people.
Or this confusing direction thing of like, we're going to just get involved with things. That's obviously they're part of saying we didn't do everything to win. So that was good, and we're gonna, no matter, as far as I'm aware, no matter what happens, I want to keep him doing scouting and keep getting better at it and approaching it in the same way. It'll be just a question of if I can convince him to do more things, or if he's going to find a job somewhere else. Then the last one for me was the quizzes. So I wanted to do a different way of approaching new patches. I don't like just giving a long presentation about the new patch. I think that's really unproductive. And I think so much of the mistakes, the silly mistakes that we see, not just from that, but from scouting as well, just come from the format, the medium. I use an example which happened this year because they talked about it. Again, I don't know why people like admitting to this stuff. But when Giant X got knocked out, they played against Vex top, and the coach after the game said we had no idea it was going top. And I can promise you 100%, someone put on some presentation, he's been spamming loads of Vex top, because random people who don't even care about the LEC knew that the Vex was going top lane. Because if you've ever opened his solo queue account, he has it, loads of it. And if you're a high elo player, you've played against him playing it. And if you know that person, you know that he just spams something weird and then plays it on stage, and it's a public account, all these reasons. But the reason that doesn't ever transmit is because it's put on some presentation somewhere and given in a 30-minute presentation about scouting the opponent, and everyone just checks out, including the head coach. And the super important stuff gets missed. And so that's why scouting was hopefully done in a slightly different way. But the same thing happens on the patch. It's like, okay, they're changing this. We think it's going to make this better, this worse, all those kind of things. And it's just boring. So I wanted to do quizzes anyway. Now, actually, the feedback I got during the split was that they're really good for the audience. But since, I think maybe that's changed. So if they're not good for the audience, we won't do them publicly. But if they are, then we'll do them publicly, because I thought it'd be good. It can do both. So instead, we ask a bunch of questions about the patch and like, okay, what did they change about this champion? And then you answer the question, and then hopefully you get some time to say, does it actually make them better, or does it make them worse, or like does this change our priority on this champion? Made some mistakes, obviously, with the quizzes. They're the first ones I did. So the first one I think was great because the patch was massive. The second one I tried to make the same length, even though the patch was much smaller. And so a lot of the quizzes questions were useless. So I think next time I'm going to do much shorter ones. I'm going to put a bit more thought into only doing the ones that I think are important. But then you obviously have to spend a lot more time working out what's important rather than just making a question for every change or anything like that. But yeah, that's a positive thing. And a lot of the positive ones are kind of easy because it's like, we'll just keep doing the same thing. The stuff with treats and stuff is a bit harder because he's changing. Stuff with team atmosphere is always a bit harder because it's a little bit not quite so clear cut, but it is good to have written down. And then stuff that's like, these processes worked really well, write them down so we just keep doing them, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love it. I think it's there's a nice roadmap here for you to sort of improve and maintain aspects of performance. There's a nice mix here of what we might call game specific, but also your own personal development as a coach. So there are some interpersonal skills here that you're going to hone and refine. There's just some communication points to be maybe not, this isn't really fair on you, but some of the communication points are to be done as early as possible, which you will be able to do because you're going to be there from the beginning, and you'll know what to draw attention to sort of tweak the formula. So yeah, so it's a nice mix, and I love the as I said, like the roadmap of how it all sort of fits together, and you can see the hot air balloon rising, and you can see everything going up a few levels. The one thing I was interested in is that you reviewed this with the head of the org.
Yeah.
So how did that go? Was that a back and forth? Was that kind of a negotiation, or was that more of a just cards on the table?
It was cards on the table. The org is changing in terms of the structure because the person who was the head of esports is now doing something else full time, and so he can't do that.
Okay.
So it was good to get on the same page with the owner, who's going to be kind of more my point of contact next split, which is good because I think a lot of the lack of clarity was the fact that he was a little bit different from the other person who was technically running things and all that kind of stuff. It was just, we obviously focused more with him on the stuff that needs to change from the org's point of view. So I wanted to make sure if we're going to do a boot camp, here's the things that I want to do around the boot camp. Here's what needs to be different from last time. Mostly he just kind of agreed on all of it. So yeah, it was just about getting clarity and discussing, making sure that we have processes for all the things that were bad on the bottom or brought us down.
Great. Yeah, fantastic. And I mean, would you anticipate these kind of conversations? Would they be more difficult if you were on like a high-end coaching salary, or do you think it's
no? I think they would be much easier if it was all like full time.
Because the org would be responsive to receiving this kind of reflection. To see like your milestones, where you plan to go.
Yeah, I think so. And one of the things that we did discuss is like, okay, how are we going to do the reporting for next split? So we're going to do a meeting every week, and I'm going to give them an update on how things are going. And these are the things I'm going to update on each person and also the team direction. And for now, that's it. And as we go through, we'll also reflect on how those updates are and if they're useful and stuff like that. So yeah, I think just clarity helps everything.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Great.
What do you call this exercise? What's your so people can go away and replicate
it? I just call it a reflection exercise, like split reflection. So my title is Nord Winter Reflection. That's the title on the draw.io document.
You can call it that. I'm gonna encourage people to use the just John's hot air balloon exercise.
The hot air balloon exercise. If you want, then I do a little hot air balloon with the logo of the team in the balloon. That's crucial. Otherwise, how will you learn? And I've done this with. I think I have like 10 now in my in my drive from a bunch of teams that I was working with the coach, or I was working with the actually I was coaching. So either way.
Yeah, fantastic.
Cool. Well, I think we probably don't have time for anything else. I'm pretty pretty tired, and that was what, an hour and 44 minutes. So I guess we'll call it there. We were going to talk
We can
about
call it there.
the EU.
Absolutely call it
We
there.
were going to fix EU, and now we've run out of time.
People will have to wait for our
Yeah,
solutions.
exactly.
But it is just worth saying that actually, kudos to you as well for doing this on a stream like this, because you've sort of reflection squared. Like you've already done this, you've already gone through it with someone, and now you've reflected on it again. It's kind of like a form of retrieval practice, which is like you're hardwiring that into your model of how your team, your process for next split is going to look. So I think I could imagine you're going to really put these points into action because they're really, really thought in depth about them. So it's cool that we've done that again.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I've mentioned this before, but like having someone to support you, so in this case it's you, like to just go through, talk about it with someone is so good. So doing this,
at one point you had 18 of us, I think, were supporting you in this,
supporting me in this journey. But just like talking it through out loud, explaining your points, why I've put that thing down, why I thought that actually was negative, or why I thought that was positive. That's fantastic. So writing it yourself is already much better than doing nothing. But talking about it with someone, especially someone who is kind of there for you rather than so it's useful for me to talk about it with the org, but it's not the same thing. It's a kind of a negotiation for the future. It's kind of a justification of the mistakes that I made in a way, whether I want it to be or not. They were very nice about the work that I did, but it's also like, oh, I know I'll do better, so that you can't avoid that being there and like underlying. Whereas finding someone who can actually just sit down with you and go through it, especially someone from the outside of the team, is fantastic. So
yes,
that's the last stage. Do the reflection, get someone to talk about it with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're not just a content team. I am genuinely here to see you grow and
Perfect.
Great.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone for watching. And I mean, if nothing else happens, we'll talk about this stuff from EU. There was a few comments that we would love to break down, and we'll fix EU next week. But for now, that's going to be it. So thanks for watching, guys.
Bye, everyone.